When I was a kid, my mother made sure that each one of her 10 children knew the name Jonas Salk. And for those of us who came at the tail end of the family, I was the 8th of the 10, she told us the story, made sure that she told us the story of the day when she, as a young mother of 4 children at that time, sat in front of the old black and white television set in the den and wept tears of joy and of gratitude and of relief as Dr. Salk announced the discovery and the development of the first effective vaccine against polio. It changed her life that day. It gave her a sense of hope and life for her children. Jonas Salk was a rock star, although from what I know of him, he probably wouldn't buy the distinction. But that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about that kind of hope and life. And we want to begin this by talking to some of the political stars. These are people who are leading the fight against Alzheimer's in particular. And so let me bring out, please, Congressman Ed Markey, who is the founder of the Congressional Alzheimer's Caucus, Congressman Chris Smith, and Senator Mark Warner. Please welcome these leaders. Good to see you. Throw open the question. There is an impression over the years that this is a fight that has been underfunded, under-resourced. Do you think so? Why? How do you change that?
Well, Alzheimer's is an issue which increasingly is the healthcare tsunami that will hit the baby boom generation, where we'll spike from 4 or 5 million Americans with Alzheimer's up to 12 to 15 million baby boomers will have Alzheimer's. So I think the recognition of the issue is growing. My mother died from Alzheimer's. We had her in the living room, for about 10 years outside of Boston. And when she died, because it's such a tough issue to actually deal with when your family member has it, I then created the Congressional Alzheimer's Caucus, which had never been created. There was breast cancer and heart disease and cancer in general all the way down the line. And I asked Chris to be, my co-chair of that, which is 11 years ago, because you actually have to get out and compete. You have to fight for these research dollars, and you have to build a national movement if you want to find the funding, because research is medicine's field of dreams from which we harvest the findings that gives hope to families. And at this point, I think we've reached a place where we can really say that people understand the issue, that the funding levels have to increase dramatically to catch up with the magnitude of the problem that will be created if we don't find the cure.
Congressman Smith, what do you think about that? That things are going to change?
They will change, but provided, it's if and only if we provide adequate funding. And Ed is right, the idea of the bipartisan caucus in a town that is almost dysfunctional with partisanship. This is one area where we come together and we say, for the sake of Alzheimer's patients, current and future, but also for their loved ones. Respite care, the need for the timeouts for those who are dealing with the agony of a loved one looking you in the eye and saying, who are you? It happens to be your wife or your husband or your mom or dad. It is an agony beyond words, and we've all experienced it in our lives. With me, it was my grandmother who said just that, who are you? So the idea of the caucus is to try to get, and we have a bill, the breakout bill, the breakthrough bill, that would provide $2 billion. Ed and I are the two principal sponsors on the House side, and it's an idea whose time has come. Before we went out of session last Congress, we put $50 billion with a B into the PEPFAR program, the President's Emergency AIDS Relief Program, which is a tremendous program over 5 years. Why can't we find $2 billion per year, 10 over 5 years, to enhance the research? 3 out of 4 of the laudable proposals that are put forward to NIH fall by the wayside for lack of funding. One of those 3 out of 4 that are on the ground because of inadequate funding could be the breakthrough, could be that trigger that leads to finding a cure, at least delaying disease. Delay certainly, enhances life for patient as well as the family. So we need an assault on this disease. It is a winnable war.
Not only is this an issue who I think time has come from a personal standpoint in terms of the tsunami of potential Alzheimer patients we'll have in this country, but I think there's a reason why the time has come for this kind of investment for two other reasons as well. Obviously we're grappling with our healthcare debate at this point. And while there are a lot of differences between what we could do or should do, the one, at least in my mind, just kind of non-debatable fact is that the current healthcare system in this country is not financially sustainable for another decade even. It is going to collapse in terms of exploding our national deficit and Medicare and Medicaid costs. It's going to double premiums. It's going to make business less competitive. And one of the most challenging diseases with an aging population in terms of just plain cost of care increasingly will be Alzheimer's. So from a plain kind of good financial sense, this is the time to make these kind of investments. As well, it's also a chance, your earlier comments about rock stars of science. If we look back over the last 25 to 30 years, what has always distinguished America from so many other nations around the world, and every time we've gone through a period where people have said, hey, America can't continue to compete, it's not going to be the leading economic power. The solution set, you think back to the 80s when it was Japan was going to eat our lunch supposedly because our manufacturing sector was going down. The solution set that kind of burst us through the 90s was innovation around IT and telecom. My sense is that one of the reasons why I think the time is now that we can actually make the very valid case for these funds is not only the personal issue, not only the healthcare issue, but if America is going to once again regain its status as the innovation capital of the world, finding the cure not only for this challenge of the disease, but the host of others that have got the other groups up here organizing, the kind of major investment we need to make in NIH to make sure that we become the innovation capital or further build that lead is something that is very, very important for a long-term economic growth standpoint.
Well, our healthcare system is broken. It's really a sick care system, and Mark already made reference to that. We have to apply CPR to it to revive it. C for coverage for all Americans. P for prevention, that we put in place the preventative policies, and R for research. We need to give it CPR. So inside of the bill itself, what we are going to do is to, and Chris and I partnered on this, is something called the Independence at Home Act, which will help dramatically to change the paradigm so that these heroes, and Chris and Mark and I each have, family experience with this, but, the people who are caring for the Alzheimer's patients are heroes, but heroes need help. And so by changing the paradigm, which we do in the legislation that passed, to move towards giving more medical help at home, we make it easier for families to keep people at home. We actually give incentives to the medical system to keep people at home because they can profit more if they can create strategies that help families do so at home. And added to what we did in the stimulus bill, which was to add these billions of dollars for research for the NIH budget. The NIH budget had been cut 16% over the last 5 years. And so that dramatic increase in the stimulus bill for the NIH budget is a signal that we're serious again. We had a terrorist attack on September 11th, and it was a tragedy. But the real terrorist that everyone is afraid of is the phone call that will come to their family, that disease that had been in their family has now hit another member. And that's millions of people who are afraid of that phone call. And what we have done here in the NIH budget this year is dramatically increase that funding. And in this healthcare reform bill that we've already passed out of our committee anyway, this independence at home strategy is something that I think will give people a lot more comfort.
Support for caregivers, heroes.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, the Independence at Home Act is a very bipartisan bill. No matter where one comes down on current healthcare reform proposals, and there are a lot of them on the table, the idea of caring for Alzheimer's patients, the respite care, as we all have said, but most importantly right now, breakout dollars, breakthrough dollars. We need to get a critical mass of money to the National Institutes of Health so that they can do the research, that they do so laudably, so we can get a breakthrough. And if we don't do it, delay is denial, and there will be people who suffer this ravaging disease who otherwise could have been spared and or delayed. And I can't stress that enough. And let me also point out, just like with the effort on global AIDS, this is a pandemic. It's not just in the United States. People are living longer all over the world, and that, of course, with early onset, that's not relevant because those people, it's not a matter of how old they are, but we know that half of those people who are age 85 or older are in some stage of developing Alzheimer's disease. That just begs the question, if we want to have longer life, which we obviously do, we need to make sure that we're putting those resources to find a cure. And we need to think cure. Mitigate on the short term, cure intermediate and long term.
Well, good luck on that, gentlemen. Thank you for your commitment, and thank you for being here.
Can I just say that rock stars of science is not an oxymoron. They really are. Science is not like congressional expert or Salt Lake City nightlife. There actually is such a thing as rock stars of science, and those are all those scientists across our country that we have to unleash. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.